Good morning and welcome to Chapter 10, Windows Installation. So at the end of this, the lab for this one is creating a virtual machine like last week, but in Windows 10 instead of Linux. So let's get started, shall we? If I can click on the right screen, then make things move again. There we go. All right, so we'll be looking at the system requirements for Microsoft. This is a bit of PR for Microsoft products. Why? You go to enterprise out there and you're pretty much going to come across Microsoft. So we've got to go through the installation of Windows because it's, like I'll lump it, it is the most commonly used operating system out there in corporate world. So features. Most operating systems now are multi-user in that they can have multiple people logged into the same host machine, and you basically can flip between the users and have access to the same resources on the system. Multitasking in that they can run multiple applications at the same time. So, and that leads into multiprocessing in that most systems are now multi-core and most of them can handle multiple CPU systems. Now, most host machines aren't multi-CPU, they're multi-core CPUs. So there is a difference. So normally the two or more CPUs you would find on servers, not on host machines. So all your the server 2016 or whatever version of server you want to run now all support multiple CPUs. And multi-threading is basically what the multi-core allows for. So, as we've described in many of the other chapters we've covered so far, the purpose of the operating system is to be that interface between you, the applications, and the hardware of the host machine. It also looks after all the management of files and applications in the system. It provides you with a user interface so you can access your applications, okay? And application management is there by default as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so this slide set covers Windows 7, 8, 8.1 and 10. I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on 7, 8. Okay, I'm just going to mainly concentrate on presenting the Windows 10 slides because there is only minor changes realistically between Windows 7 and Windows 10. Okay, they've only been minor upgrades in some of the features. It hasn't been anything major. So,
it's mainly cosmetic, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's mostly cosmetic, isn't it? The changes?
Yeah, most of it is cosmetic. So I've just got to turn up my speakers a bit. Some of the features that they were advertising for Windows 7 didn't eventuate until they released 8 and 10.
Yep.
So Windows 10 is basically the package that they said Windows 7 was going to be.
Right.
They finally got all their bugs sorted out and released what they promised at Windows 7. So the main varieties of host operating systems, if you like, is Windows, Linux, being Ubuntu or whatever, Red Hat, and OS X, and that other operating system that goes on that other hardware, the Mac OS, which is basically a Linux BSB with a pretty GUI on top of it. So, all right. So if you look here, most of the requirements are pretty much the same going up through the systems. So they, the only one they really changed is the minimum requirements for the resolution. At Windows 8, they seem to fixated on the 1024 by 768 as a minimum, which really didn't make sense. So things to take into account is 1 gig of RAM for 32-bit and 2 gig for 64. These are the absolute minimum requirements, and you really need to remember that as the minimum requirements, you create your virtual machine with those in mind. But remember, if you're running minimal standards, you're not going to have the highest performance. Okay? So basically 32 is recommended, 4 gig of RAM. It's pretty much standard across. Yeah, Robert. It also comes down to your native resolution on your monitors. It really does. Some of them just weren't, especially the older monitors, didn't like that resolution. So things you need to remember is to check your compatibility. Not all hardware is compatible with all operating systems, and there's a little tool there that checks your compatibility for Windows 10. Always have, I won't say always, have a system of upgrading your operating system, whether that's automatically or via an enterprise push on a regular basis. Okay, especially at home, you should turn it on, updates automatically. I know Microsoft has a habit of messing with all your settings that you have when you do an update on it, but generally you need the updates to do base security upgrades in the operating system, and without them you're going to have an issue with the upgrade. Now, by default, I've got most of your mics turned off, so if you want to chat to me, make sure you turn your mic back on. Data migration tools. This one is always a bit of a hit and miss. Microsoft has always said they can upgrade from an older version of operating system to the new ones. That's never worked for me. Personal experience, I've always used a brand new image when upgrading between operating systems. So because of that, back up all your data which you should be doing on a regular basis, as I can test what happens if you don't back up on a regular basis. You lose stuff.
And then you get to like freak out trying to get it back and
Yeah,
having
it's not
absolutely
good.
no hope.
And when you do it on a enterprise level, that's really, really bad.
Yeah.
So there's lots of little tools out there that can do the migration and backing up for you. So there's no real issues there. Now, installing is fairly easy, especially in today's state of technology. We have copious amounts of hard drive space available to us very cheaply now. Most operating systems can even be installed on flash drives because of the size of flash drives now are big enough to handle a operating system being installed in them. And our desktops and laptops are now set up to be able to boot off flash drives. And when I say hard drives, just assume I'm also going to include solid state drives in that as well. Okay, let's save a lot of, hard drives. No, solid state. It's storage. Okay. One has magnetic platters and one has memory chips. Okay. What's better? Well, I've had horror stories both ways. So, as a general rule of thumb, the solid state drives, because it's memory, tends to be faster, but it does have its own issues. Partitioning. Two standards are the master boot record and the globally unique identifier, the GUID. However you'd like to do that one, and the GPT partition tables. So depending on your operating system, it will run better with certain types of partitions. So that is something you need to look at. And there are restrictions on the storage size or the maximum size of the partition and the number of partitions that those records can control. So here we've got NBR saying 4 primary partitions up to 2 terabytes each. Whereas GPT, we have 128 partitions with 9.4 gigabytes. I've never handled a gigabyte before. Don't know about you. It's, I'm sure our people over at Amazon and those sort of places do it on a regular daily basis, but yeah, I haven't.
10 to the power of 21. That's 21 zeros, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah. So 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. Yeah. All right. So partitions and logical drives. You've got a primary partition which you boot from. Yeah. I don't think anybody does, Christopher. That's imagine forgetting how many keystrokes you've pressed and having to go back and count them again. That'd be annoying. But yeah. All right. So the primary partition is where you're going to boot from. With Microsoft until Windows 10 really didn't like not being the first cab off the rank.
Huh.
Your Linux and other versions of operating systems were quite happy putting a little redirect and then having their master boot records and that located elsewhere on the drive. They were very flexible, but Microsoft wants them in a specific place on the hard drives for them to operate correctly. So doing multiple boot systems was interesting when doing that. Logical drives are exist within an extended partition, which allows you to divide it up and assign your drive letters and handle your volume management nicely. In this day and age, a lot of systems don't even bother using partitions. Like if you buy a system, you generally will have a little recovery partition, and then everything else is just the primary. Alright, so file systems, this is how the file allocations occur and the tracking of where the files are on your storage device. FAT32, then NTFS extended FAT, which is the FAT64 came in, and it can support larger than 4 gig drives. So each of them has their pluses and minuses, and you basically have to choose the appropriate one for what you're using. I'll just leave it as that. Generally speaking, the default settings on your install will handle most of them. Okay, so after you get the machine installed with an operating system, one of the first things you should be doing is setting up user accounts. And going, well, I'm the only user. Well, you should still create yourself a user account that's not got administrative rights. You go, but why? Well, if you get a little virus or something attacking you, you will not want to give it administrative rights by default, because it will inherit the rights that your account has. So if you have a administrative rights and you get an exploit occurring on that account, it has administrative rights by default, because it inherits your access rights. So as a general rule of thumb, you should create yourself a standard user account, which you use on a daily basis, and then just give yourself, run as administrator with a separate account when you need to do those installs that require administrative access. This will give you an extra layer of protection on your system. So you have your administrator and standard user, and if you look under the users, you still have different, you can add user privileges to the accounts as well, and access to different areas. Windows updating, as I said earlier, you should have it installed automatically on your home systems. If you're in an enterprise, you may want to have that turned off, because you don't want, 60, 70 machines going off and pulling down updates all at once. It destroys your bandwidth. So what you might want to do is do the enterprise updates. So basically what that does is your administrator pulls down the update and then pushes an enterprise update out to the users. Okay. Device Manager is fantastic for controlling your hardware. So this will give you access to any devices that are connected to your machine. It allows you to update and configure the drivers for those particular devices as you need to. You can clone disks within the operating system, and there's various methods. I don't tend to use the ones that come with an operating system. I tend to use third-party applications for cloning disks and that sort of thing, because it allows you to do it a little bit more neater, and most of them tend to have better feature sets in them. But okay, so it's there. It can duplicate the disk sector by sector to another disk. So this allows you to fully back up that base system and allow you to restore it if you need to at some other stage. Personally, I just create a master image in in my heyday it was Ghost, but there's plenty of other versions that are out there now that have gotten faster. Ghost is an old one. So especially when you start working with VMs and that, there's lots better ways of doing it. Installation methods: you can push a config full installation out over a network, okay, which can be done as an unattended installation or remote installation. A unintended installation means you don't have to, hit the enter key every time it prompts you up. Microsoft still loves prompting you for useless, you're going to hit the enter key here. I'm going to stop installing, but you only have one option of entering the enter key. So image restoring is what most industry uses, and that's to push an image out to the machine. And I'll leave that slide alone. So remote network installation, you basically have a TFTP server running somewhere in your domain, and when the system boots up, it finds the IP address and mask and that, and then goes off and finds that server and downloads the image from it. When you're doing unattended network installations, you basically create your script, if you like, and then you run that, and it creates the installation running from the script. And within the script, you basically tell it all the answers to the prompts that would normally come up during the installation process. Recovery partitions, very standard on laptops and can be used even on desktops. Okay, so most of your big corporate suppliers will now have a recovery partition, and they won't give you disks with your purchase anymore, because the recovery is, so your operating system and all that information is in your recovery partition, and it'll boot and give you a fresh install from that. Generally, it requires a specific key sequence on boot to access it. Upgrades. In-place upgrades. No, don't do it. Do a clean install all the time. I've never had an in-place upgrade work and not give me many headaches afterwards. Boot sequence. We will tend to boot off a CD, DVD, or hard drive now. Back in the dim, dark days, we used to have floppy disks that used to always boot from. Now we can set this up. Instead of booting off a CD, we could boot off a USB. So it comes down to what your operating system and your BIOS supports for that boot sequence. On my desktop here, I can specify up to 4 boot devices, and the way it works is it will check for a bootable system in order of the devices listed, and as soon as it hits a bootable system in a device, it'll boot from there. If it doesn't find one, it moves on to the next device. Safe mode with networking command prompt, known configuration. So, safe mode is a basic operating system that is used for diagnostics and troubleshooting. Doesn't load all the drivers. The networking is the same, but it actually loads the drivers for the network card. Command prompt, so rather than loading up the GUI, it just gives you the command prompt for you to go through. And last known configuration loads the settings last time that Windows started up. So it's basically every time you do an upgrade, it takes a snapshot of the config settings and stores them, and it will basically use that snapshot as its default settings. So basically bypassing any recent upgrades that you did. So I'll let you read that one. So basically with the boot sequence, you can boot it up with many different types of options. So safe mode, low resolution, logging, no logging, disable automatic restarts. You can read them. I'm not going to read them out to you. Yes, I'm being slack. All right, so I should have been adding this slide on the back end of Chapter 9. Some of the common host applications for virtual machines, Vmware, the one that we have been using, it's in all of our classrooms. You have Microsoft's Hyper-V. I don't recommend using Hyper-V. It's they may have fixed it. I haven't looked at it recently, but originally in Hyper-V, any changes to the guest operating system could make changes to the host operating system's dynamic libraries. So yes, Brock, you will, and you should have had access to I'll put it back up in the Dropbox. But yeah, VirtualBox is a application that is released by Oracle, and it's equivalent to Vmware. If you're running a Mac system, VirtualBox is the one you'll want, because VMware Player costs you big reasonable money in the Apple Store. Docker is another one that is quite interesting, especially if you're doing anything via the cloud. So it's an interesting system, one that I've only started looking at, so I haven't got my head around it enough to actually include it as something to teach yet. But I'm just going to make sure you know about it, so if you feel like doing some extra research, you can. Do yourself a favor and look up Network Chuck on YouTube. He's one of the CPT Nugget instructors who are corporate training video creators. He does some interesting snippets on technology across a whole range of areas. He's quite energetic. He's an American, so he's always hyper.
That's because of the beard, isn't it? That's why he's got your respect.
Yes, he's got a reasonable beard, so yeah,
I mean, it's not quite as luscious as yours, but
he's got to be trustworthy with a beard like that, doesn't he?
yeah.
No, he's quite a good presenter, and he gives good explanations in terms that most people will be able to grasp. You don't need to be a tech head to understand his videos. So he's quite a good resource aid. Monitoring tools. Now this, I'll give you a hint. Hint. Assessment 1. Monitoring tools. Assessment 1. Okay. So SolarWinds. They have a huge range of tools available for free. They package them up in with like GNS3, which is a network simulation package, emulation package, not simulation package. They bundle such things as SolarWinds and Wireshark and all these good things in with that. Pasla PRTG Network Monitor gives you Hyper-V, VMware, Parallels, containers, Amazons. So there are a bucket load of different applications that do virtualization out there. And good old Task Manager, if you're doing bits on the host machine, it'll give you information on hardware and network statistics in relation to those virtual machines. In other words, how much resources they're using on the host machine. So you can monitor the host machine resources using Task Manager, SolarWinds, Pasla, and that for the actual virtual machines themselves. So in summary, we had a quick, and I mean quick, installation overview of Windows 10, looked at setting up the partitions and installing the operating system. Installing an operating system really is follow the prompts. But when you go into an enterprise level, you got to go, okay, well, I'm not just installing it on one machine. I might want to push it out to multiple machines at once, and I don't want to be walking around to all these machines and, you know, hitting the enter keys and typing in options all the time. So you write a script, so you do unattended installations, and then there's the third-party images that you can push out as well. So that's this chapter in a nutshell, which is all nice, quick and neat and tidy. Okay, now, where is it? There it is. Notice I've got a nice clean screen here on this monitor. It's lovely. Okay. Kelly 1 was my first one that I recorded that the sound didn't work. Perfect
Kelly 2
install,
worked, did it?
no issues. And then I discovered the audio in my capturing software was sounding a bit like Alvin and the Chipmunks. But you can actually understand Alvin and the Chipmunks. You couldn't understand my audio. So yeah. Kelly 2 is the installation that I eventually got to after a couple more recording attempts to get the new video up. So yeah, that was interesting. So for the people that weren't here the last time, my Windows VM workstation is version 12. Why? Because it's a licensed copy. Okay. I don't really want to install the unlicensed copy of VM15 and then have to pay another license fee for something that works quite well as version 12. Although I've got to remember to update it. Now, same thing, ISO image, or if you've got the CD, run it off the CD. Now, if you go to do a search on YouTube, you will find a very quick, easy guide on how to download an Windows 10 ISO off the Microsoft site using Chrome. You basically tell Chrome not to be Chrome, tell it to be Safari, which means you're not running on a Microsoft platform, so therefore you need the ISO image. If you connect and it believes you're using a Windows platform, it will try to do an install off Microsoft site. Okay?
You're kidding, mate.
It won't give you the ISO. So the ISOs are still available, but you can do that. Or I can drop it in the Dropbox for you.
How do I tell Chrome to be Safari?
Hey?
How do I tell Chrome to be Safari?
In the settings, off the top of my head, I'll have to look it up again. Just do a YouTube search on it. It's really easy. Even an old guy like me could sort it out in a couple of minutes after watching the YouTube video. It's not something I do that often, right? So I can't remember the steps. I know it's there. I just look up the YouTube clip every time I've got to do it. So, I don't know. I just open this up. Yeah. Ready to use? Yep. Hello. There you go. Thank you. I will post the link up to that file for you in Dropbox into Discord because it will take a little while to upload. And probably won't upload. That's a 3.7 gigabyte. I think my Dropbox is only 2 gigabyte by default. Come to think of it. Alright, I'll sort it out. Alright, so select an image, open it. So you don't have to have the ISO image there to create the virtual machine. And select your operating system. Now I've just gone to 32 because it is the smaller ISO and takes the less resources as a minimum. You can get away with doing a 1 gig virtual machine. Okay. And again, as a minimum, we can get away with 20 gigabytes. This time we'll make it 25. And again, split into multiple files so that's easier to copy. Microsoft doesn't like copying 25 gigabyte files at once. So splitting it up into multiple files allows it to copy it. So this time it defaults to 1 gigabyte. Remember the Linux one defaulted to like 512 megabytes. That's why I failed spectacularly last time. Forgot to increase the RAM. I'm going to have them as a 4 gig machine. I've got a 16 gig RAM set up on this machine, so having two virtual machines running 4 gigabytes is not going to really affect what's going on. And again, it has created the virtual hardware. Now I turn on the virtual machine and it'll go up and start looking at that ISO to do a installation. And what English, time and currency format. Yeah. Way up here, we've got Australia. Just language.
Yeah, we speak American.
Well, you can change it to Australian, British, whatever. They still use the American English because, you know, the Yanks, they don't understand that there's actually a difference. Don't need to put in a product key. You can run without. Choose whichever version, Home, Pro. Actually, I should have selected Pro. Pro just gives us a few more networking options. Whichever one you want. So yeah, I know. Don't try to copy a file to Dropbox and then open it under VMware. It doesn't like it. Now, it's going to kick off and start doing that. That's going to take a while. So if I come up here into so let's put this one down into here. And okay, so that's the Microsoft download. And if you hit download now, it'll try to do an install of Microsoft site. So the way to do it is over here in what tools? Developer tools. And then is it not? I'm going to have to look at this. Network conditions. There it is. Console. Network. Network conditions. User agent. No, I don't want it to do it automatically. I want to say on something else, like a Safari on a Mac.
All this time, I spent all that time trying to work it out, and I'm finally here, and you're just all like, "Oh yeah, I'm here, doing it." Here you go, guys.
All right, so just turn it off into one of them. Even a BlackBerry will do, as long as it's not a Microsoft based system. And then if you just do a refresh, you get the ISO file. And then select the one you want. All right, so you can have a look around at academic pages, all that sort of stuff. I want Windows 10 download.
This is such a powerful program. There's 4 errors on this page.
It's Microsoft page. What do you expect? Okay, then select your 32-bit, and there you go.
Wow.
You get to download it.
My buttons are the opposite way around. I have 64-bit first.
Oh wow!
I know. Does it matter which one we get, or are we better off with 32?
I'm going to suggest your 32 ISO because the minimum requirements for the 32-bit operating system is 1 GB of RAM.
Yep.
So if your host machine that you're doing the virtual machine on only has 4 gig of RAM,
Yeah, okay.
downloading the 32 will allow you to have 2 machines and still have your host machine running.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
If you've got the 64-bit version, the minimum RAM you can allocate is 2 gigabytes.
Yep, and then you definitely can't have a second. Yep, okay.
Yeah. So I strongly recommend that you download the 32 just because it gives you the maximum.
So how long do you think it should take for this to download?
I can't answer that. That depends on your internet connection, doesn't it?
Yeah, I
And the
suppose.
amount of traffic. There's too many variables. On my connection, it only took 15, 20 minutes.
Okay.
It wasn't that long. It's 3.7 gig.
Yeah, well, I question whether or not it's worth. It says it's going to take 12 minutes now, but I almost question whether or not it was just worth getting a torrented version, but then I guess there's variables
Yeah,
that.
there's variables on the torrent. Cooper, yes, your defender will tell you there's a bucket load of threats in that virtual machine because Kelly
is
has
is
bugs in it. That's what we want Kelly for. Okay, I'll just scroll that up. So that's still going. I need to close those. Yes, Robert, that's right. It's actually doing its job. Is it going to allow me to open up a second version? Yes, it is. So, software updates, yeah, remind me later.
so did you
I
sorry,
sorry, Tim.
with the
Go for
Kali
it.
version, did you download the ISO as itself and install it yourself?
Yep.
Okay.
Basically, I did the same process of installing. So if you actually do, you don't have to do the Kali image. You can just do Ubuntu or any other Linux version you want. Okay.
Well, I like the sound
Um,
of Kali because it's designed to like.
if you want to play around with cybersecurity, Kali's the one to get.
Yep. Yep.
No, the tools that are embedded in Kali for cybersecurity will come up as positive in your AVs. It has a strong possibility of doing that.
Because it has a strong possibility of hacking into your computer.
Um, it shouldn't under VMware.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right, because it doesn't have. Unless you give it access to the network card.
Yeah, so it should be alright.
Obviously, you're in control of it, though, so you'd have to do it, wouldn't you?
Yeah. The idea is by default it doesn't have access to your host machine.
Yeah.
That's why we like using virtuals. Now, obviously, with me running 2 virtual machines at the moment, things are slowing down a little bit because both virtual machines are on the same hard drive, so they're both trying to access the same drive at the same time.
Is it a disk drive or a solid state drive?
It is an old hard drive.
Okay.
Um,
That's probably spinning off its head.
yeah, it's not too bad.
Okay.
My solid state is dedicated to my
Games.
operating system. That's it.
Oh, okay.
Now, when I went to install Kelly, my Kaspersky went nuts every time it went to download the any of the security applications, because it kept giving it a false positive for the files, the applications. So if we look here, vulnerability analysis, password attacks, wireless attacks, exploitation, all of these things, and especially these ones, Kelly bugs and, security training. These things are tools that, if you've got a decent antivirus, should trigger an alarm. Because guess what? It's what hackers use to actually hack in some of these tools. We use them to find the same loopholes that the hackers want to exploit. Okay, so we, want to give off the alarms, because guess what? The hackers are going to be using the same tools. We use them for the good stuff. They don't. So, and what I want to do is write a few labs around using this and incorporate it into some of the stuff we do as we move forward, just to make some of the stuff we're doing a little bit more interesting. But I'm playing catch up at the moment, so I may not get, I'm not going to get it done in time for what we need here.
So wait,
But
is your Carly connected to the internet?
yeah, see there?
Okay. Yep. Yeah. No, because I had like heaps of trouble getting before I even started this course. I think I paid like $10 or $15 for a course that was to do with cybersecurity, and every time I installed Carly, I couldn't get it to actually use my network card,
Okay.
and I couldn't work out
What
why for the life of
were
me.
you using, Vmware or something
Yeah,
else?
no, I was.
Okay. I generally don't have any issues getting out using VMware.
Yep.
VirtualBox, I've had issues.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it could be
yeah,
because it's 15, but who would know, really?
but it shouldn't.
No.
So one of the things you need to be able to do as part of the assessment is take screenshots of you being suspending the guest operating system and things like that. So using these functions, suspending it, shutting it down, changing adapters, managing the tools and the machine settings. All right, so you can take screenshots of that. So we want to install, we're in Australia. It's going to go off. I'm going to close that. Oh, look. What keyboard? US. No, skip. Now, obviously, the time taken to do these is totally dependent on your host hardware, how much RAM you've got, how much free space you've got. Alright, so, and as you can see, I've got 2 virtual machines running on my desktop at the moment. Okay. So
what? Just a question that's slightly off topic, not entirely, but slightly. What's the best way to run? Say, if I wanted to run the same program side by side, like a game, how would using VMware be an ethical way of doing that? Efficient, sorry, or no?
side by side, yes, but if you, it comes down to the licensing. You wouldn't be able to do it using Steam accounts, for example. You still
Yep.
need 2 separate accounts.
Yeah, of course.
But if it's the older games that are running installed off the old media, you could certainly run those side by side in virtual machines.
Yep.
So I'll let that just run and finish the install, but that's basically going to be it. It's just going to be finishing this, which is going through setting up a user account. If you're on an enterprise, you'd go in and set up your domains and that, but we're at home. We don't have a domain controller set up, so we don't want to try to connect it. No thanks. Oh, that's a new update. That's the May update. Oh,
Just use an offline account, can't you? Bottom left.
hello. Get to know it. No, I don't want to know it. Really.
You'll have to press limited XPM. That's just rude, I think.
Alright, so user account,
it's done.
password, my usual 5 dots, confirm, security questions, really, first school attended, then you go. Second question, oldest cousin, Frank. No. Do I have a cousin Frank? No.
I would hope not.
She was born in Bendigo. Was I born in Bendigo? No.
Again, I would hope not.
For some reason, as I'm recording this and going up on the internet, I really don't want to use true information. Yes, exactly, Robert. I've not.
Want to better go though?
Yes, Frank was born in Bendigo.
It's alright, we'll just steal Frank's identity.
Yeah. All right, so this is interesting because this is the new upgrade from the old original ISOs that I had. Oh, God, no. Decline.
I remember I turned on Cortana, and then it wasn't Cortana's voice, it was like some UK lady. And I was pretty upset. I had to, like, stuff around for 10 minutes trying to change it back to the original Cortana voice.
Online speech recognition. Yeah, rack off. Online device.
Sorry, I grew up with Halo, so it was kind of like fanboy. I asked her where Master Chief was. Not gonna lie.
Well, the wife was watching one of the, you know, because everybody's doing Zoom meetings and all that sort of stuff now.
Yeah.
You know, some of the outtakes from remote meeting mistakes. Lady had, what's the Google's Home Assist or whatever it's bloody called, running. Okay, she had the smart home.
Right.
So, one Alexa, yeah. So during the meeting, one of the people asked a question of her, and Alexa chimed in the background with the answer. Kind of highlights you got to be aware of what's going on using these smart appliances. I mean, I'm sure you've all noticed that if you're running an Android-based phone, you will be talking about things and then suddenly get ads popping up in your browser for topics that you've talked about. Especially if you've got Alexa running and all those sort of things. So
is that the same with iPhone? Or is it just Android?
I've only experienced it with Android because I've got a Samsung, so
okay.
I don't use the iPhone. So I'm going to guess yes, because they're all pretty much wanting to know exactly what you're doing all the time.
Now, is that actually legal? That's my biggest question about it.
No, it's a massive invasion of privacy.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like when you do a search in your browser.
Yeah.
You then get ads for the topic that you searched on once.
Uh-huh.
Got the answer to what you wanted. Now you got to put up with ads for 4 weeks from it, you know. Welcome to Windows, yeah. Close that off. So there we are. We have Windows installed, and we can now start using it. Now, if we come up into settings, in the networks, we can do the old adapter settings. So we can, under properties, now set the IP address and start exploring and doing other things with the machine. Now, as per the last one, you can suspend this guest operating system, shut it down via the workstation, equivalent to a hard power off, or just like any operating system, shut it down via the operating system. It keeps the integrity of the operating system. Microsoft is more tolerant of not being shut down correctly. If you don't shut down Linux and that correctly, you can have major issues with file corruption and stuff. So just be aware of that one. Now, well, if I remember correctly, where did I put them? They're all in there. So my virtual machines drive, there's my Kelly drive, there's my Windows 10. So if I want another one, I can just go copy, paste. It will copy the machine over. So you can copy it to thumb drives, external hard drives, whatever you need. Now, it's not going to be the full 25 gig or 60 gig, whatever hard drive you specified in your settings, because the beautiful thing about having the virtual machine and having it as a component, a split hard drive, is that it'll only make the portions of the virtual drive that it needs. So it's not going to automatically consume 60 gigabytes of your hard drive space just because you've made a virtual drive of 60 gig. It has the potential to use 60 gig. Alright. So while that's copying, we can have a look in there. So there's your 7 virtual drives components, but you'll notice the first 2 have got reasonable amount of volume, so 3.8 and 2.7 gig, and then it comes down to 89 and 512K. Alright, so it only uses what it needs to in drive space. Alright, as we install more stuff into the virtual machine, it'll consume more of these components to increase its storage. And when you start up the new machine, it'll ask you whether you copied it, moved it, and make a few adjustments based on how you answer that. And I always recommend you create a backup copy of your virtual machine and store it somewhere, because that way you can play around with your guest machine as much as you like, and if you break it or do something you can't recover from, you can always copy a fresh base install across and start all over again. Alright, so there's the copy 10-2, and how do I open it? Virtual drive, virtual machine. Well, I copied it. So it's just, okay, it's locked the drives down so you can't copy them anywhere, and it's booting it up. And basically what it does, what it should do, is give it a different MAC address on the virtual interface. Okay. So if you look, oh, this is testing the memory. Let's go into Windows 10 while that's booting up. I think it's that one. No. Yeah. So, see this?
The MAC address. That's cool, as.
So if we look at the second one, which is that one. So 60, it's currently got the same one. So that's going to be a problem, isn't it? So you basically have to make sure those are different if you want to run multiples on the same. Spin, power off, to whatever you want. Alright, so later on, so today's task is read chapter 10. I'll turn on chapter 10 chapters and the previous ones for those that need it for the week again. The lab basically for this chapter is doing that, installing the virtual machine. Okay. So has anybody got any issues with the ability to download the ISO off? No? No more questions? Stop recording so that Tim doesn't become too popular.